Welcome to the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast. I am Jeremiah Regan.
And I'm Juan, and we're back with Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. On to lecture number 5 today, Christmas Future. I hope to live to be another man.
Lecture 5 focuses on stave 4, and it has a really fun device, one that you might recognize from It's a Wonderful Life. Scrooge, like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life, gets a chance to see what could happen going forward. He gets to see the consequences of his actions. And just like in It's a Wonderful Life, it causes him to want to make some changes, though I think A Christmas Carol is a superior rendition of this vision of the future because of the depth of the spiritual instruction that Scrooge gets.
Yeah, I hadn't put that together, actually, the connection with It's a Wonderful Life, but I think you're right, and they are both conversion stories. But here in this, in Lecture 5, it's when we'll get to the heart of Scrooge's conversion, and it's when a verse from Scripture is brought up. The verse is, although it's not mentioned what verse it is in the book itself, but it's Mark 9:36, when it says, and he took a child and set him in the midst of them. And it doesn't continue on to verse 37, but Dr. Dwight Lindley reminds us that following verse is Mark 9:37, which is not actually mentioned in the book, but Dwight Lindley reminds us that the readers at the time would have known that the verse is, whosoever receives one such children in my name receives me.
It'd be a little bit on the nose if Dickens had put that in the book, because as a reader, just like Scrooge, we're supposed to realize that the character of Tiny Tim is a child that Scrooge can receive and accept the grace of a heavenly child.
That's right, and that's when, we're reading this in the time of Christmas, and what is it that we're celebrating? We're celebrating the incarnation, the time when Christ came into the world in the form of a child.
And especially as we'll see in the next lecture, it's a sign that Christ, as we're promised in Revelation, will make all things new. We're really happy that you're listening to the podcast with us. We enjoy all of you subscribers. This course is really worth seeing. There's custom illustrations. We've taken pains to make it look really beautiful. So enjoy listening to it and then take some time to watch it. This story is worth revisiting more than once. So go to hillsdale.edu/course. That's hillsdale.edu/course to take full benefit of the beauty of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
And now let's turn to Dwight Lindley on Lecture 5, Christmas Future. I hope to live to be another man.
We're here to talk today about Stave 4 and the last of the spirits to visit Scrooge. We've seen, just to recall, the visit from Marley. We've seen the visit from the Ghost of Christmas Past and the Ghost of Christmas Present. Now we're moving into the future. If you recall, last time at the tail end of Stave 3, the Ghost of Christmas Future is already edging into the scene. Unlike the other two, we reflected on this, that he is, the future is actually early. The past is right on time, and the present is late. Why would that be? I think there's a kind of experiential realism there, that the past is the thing that is always present to you, whether you want it to be or not, and maybe you don't want it to be, right? Think of the ghost pulling aside the curtains right on time. Scrooge doesn't want him to be there, but he's there. The present, you're looking for it, you're waiting for it. When is it going to come? You're never quite present to the present, in the way that you maybe aspire to be. And then the future comes early. This is at least, I think, as you get older, a familiar way of experiencing time and the different kind of modes of time. Whatever the case, we've got this ghost now. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. All right, so this, in some ways, is the most like what we might expect from a haunting. We have a classic Grim Reaper type figure, blacker than black, and, just kind of melding into the darkness, silent, and so forth. With that, we should just take one moment and contrast this spirit with the other two. Actually, with the other three, because we can include Marley. Notice how radically different each of these ghosts is. Marley is the spirit of a dead person. The other three are not. What the heck are they even? The Ghost of Christmas Past is some weird shapeshifter thing that symbolizes the past, and at a certain point symbolizes Scrooge's past. He says, actually, I am your past. Okay. Then the second one, the Ghost of Christmas Present, is this big jolly giant who symbolizes this particular year. So he is a year. The Ghost of Christmas Past is Scrooge's past. Marley is the ghost of a particular person who's dead. And now, what is the Ghost of Christmas Future? I mean, I don't even know what this is, he's a Grim Reaper. Well, what's that? But it's another kind of thing altogether, is my point. They're all so different. How do we make sense of all this? I think the only answer we're going to get is, this is a dream. This is dreamlike. This is the unity that these visitations all have together, is the unity that we get from a dream. They hang together just because they are together, and because they all slur together in this weird, upside down, paradoxical fairy tale mode that we're in. And we just go along with it. Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? Said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us, Scrooge pursued. Is that so? Maybe. Whatever he's going to get out of this spirit, he's going to have to infer. And he's ready to do that now, though. That's actually important. With the other two spirits, he had to receive a lot. They had to put it all out there and explain it to him, because he was stuck in himself, especially at the start. Now he's much more outside of himself. He's looking, he's searching, he's interpreting, he's seeing. Ghost of the future, he says, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Silence. So he reaches out with almost an act of faith. I know your purpose is to do me good. He believes that all of this is going to be worked for his good now. And he's hoping that this will actually enable him to change and be the person that he now wants to be. It's different from what he was. There's a kind of faith in the transformative process here. It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. Lead on, said Scrooge. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit. They move forward, and here we start with this mystery, where we move out into the stock exchange area, where all of Scrooge's former friends and associates are, and they're all talking about a dead man. I mean, it's manifestly obvious to the reader that this is Scrooge from the start. Scrooge doesn't quite pick up on that. So this is this funny position we're in, where we know something, it's so obvious, and he's not picking up on it. Why does Dickens put us in precisely that position? Let's just think about it. They're talking about this dead man. The phantom is guiding Scrooge through it. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. So notice he's kind of reaching out of himself to understand things and interpret things, get into other people, figure out where this is all going. This kind of motion outside of the self is all new for him. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost's province was the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with himself, to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement, he resolved to treasure up every word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. Okay, all makes a kind of sense. I just want to underline this one phrase. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard. So that's his attitude now. He's looking for the truth. He's looking for the wisdom here, like a good student, I guess, that he has become. But there's also a biblical allusion there, of course, because it's the Virgin Mary in the early chapters of the Gospel of Luke who treasures up all of these things in her heart. What things? The things that are happening to her son. Strange things that are happening. First with the angel, then with the child Jesus. I think the last time that the Gospel says this is when they find him as a young man in the temple with the rabbis and everything. And none of this makes any sense, but she's going to treasure it up in her heart. Well, that's where Scrooge is now. He is, he's going to sift through things and contemplate and figure things out. And accordingly, as we see in the next few paragraphs, he's got a kind of interiority now that he didn't used to have. The start of this book, he's stuck inside of himself, but he doesn't have a rich interior life. He's not thinking things, he's not feeling things deeply, he's not poring over things, but now he kind of is. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner. Things are not as they were. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. So notice he's kind of he's got these little plans, these dreams of a new way that he's going to turn. These are all things he's kind of processing inside. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand and its situation in reference to himself that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. Again, that sort of attunement to the other, to the other person looking at him, and the way that makes him feel. These are all just the kind of ways of being in the world that are new growth in Scrooge. Now we continue to hear these conversations between people talking about dead Scrooge, but he's unnamed and unrevealed as yet. We get these sort of base people who are selling Scrooge's worldly goods. I mean, I say they're base. On the other hand, you can kind of understand. I mean, this guy's a real jerk. Nobody cared about him because he didn't care about anybody. You know, why would they care about, selling his stuff, I guess, at a certain point. So they're there at the pawn shop, the charwoman and the laundress and the undertaker's man. And they're piecing out all of his stuff. His clothes, his sheets, his bed curtains, and so on and so forth. One thing we should notice is Scrooge doesn't recognize that these are his bed curtains. Why on earth is that? Wouldn't you recognize? In a way, it's as surprising, as surprising as the fact that he doesn't recognize this is all about him. I think we put all that together. Part of why he's got such density on this point is maybe that he is just not thinking about himself as much, right? Maybe he's not in as egoistic a place now as he was. Maybe that's a hypothesis. They're talking about all of his worldly goods. Are these his blankets? Asks Joe, the pawnbroker. Whose else do you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take cold without him, I dare say. This dead guy that they've stolen all the stuff from. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. Ah, you may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting it? Asked old Joe. Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. She literally stripped his corpse of his clothes, the clothes off his back. So this is kind of funny in a dark sense. I think it's meant to be a little bit darkly humorous, and yet Scrooge, in the next paragraph, listened to this dialogue in horror. Why is he horrified? He doesn't know this is him, but he's horrified because he has sympathy with the dead body. Part of what's important here to see is that he is sympathetic with this dead person who is himself. He's sympathetic with this potential future dead version of himself. And which is to say he's loving himself without knowing that it is himself. There's a kind of, he's both abstracted, not loving selfishly, right? But loving himself just as a person with human dignity. And the reason that he's horrified here is there's a kind of carelessness about the body of the dead man. What's the problem with that? Anyone who's been around the body of a dead loved one knows that while there's been some passage of the spirit from the body, right, this is not the person that I knew and loved. Nevertheless, the body that is still there is still precious because this was inhabited by the soul. This was held together by the form of the soul, and all of the facial features, the bodily features that I knew and loved were there. There's something precious here, and that has a dignity still in death. This is why funerals are such particular and fastidious things, or at least should be.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Okay, so he's horrified at this appropriately, at the carelessness about this dead body. And we can feel the setup happening, right? He's being horrified so that when the reveal happens, he can apply it all to himself. It's a little bit of that Nathan and David experience. This is the prophet Nathan from the second book of Samuel, who tells King David the story of this parable, right, of a lamb, and it really riles David up. And then Nathan reveals that this story is actually about you. You're the one that you're all riled up about. You're the one that you're angry about. This story is actually about you. Scrooge is in the same position here. They're laughing about stripping the corpse. Scrooge says to the ghost, "Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?" So he's empathizing with himself, not knowing that it's himself. He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. I just want to underscore there that the dead body speaks a language of its own. What is that language? By its very way of being in the room, of occupying space, it's saying something to him. It's establishing its dignity, its value, its worth, even though it's a dead body. Why is that important? Because Scrooge, his education, his transformation here is into the kind of person who can hear the call of being, who can hear the call of creation, of the beauty of little things, concrete little things that don't even matter. In a certain sense, a dead body doesn't matter at all. What is it? But of course it matters. It's something that has been made, that has had profound meaning, and retains a kind of dignity. He can hear the voice of this created particular concrete thing, just like he did Fezziwig's calves in an earlier stave. The room is dark. Scrooge glanced toward the phantom. He's beckoning Scrooge to uncover this corpse and see who it is. It doesn't happen, though. The narrator in that context says, "O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set up thine altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast at thy command, for this is thy dominion." So this kind of melodramatic language towards death governing this dead corpse and everything. But listen now. "But of the loved, revered, and honored head, thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purposes," speaking still to death here, "or make one feature odious." There's something about this head of a dead person that death can't touch, doesn't touch. "It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous, and true, the heart brave, warm, and tender, and the pulse amends. Strike, shadow, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound to sow the world with life immortal." Okay, what are we talking about here? What the narrator is sort of dramatically bringing out is that death can kill the body, but the reason the body is precious is because the soul that animated it formerly rises up above and beyond death, is unconquerable. There's this kind of grace about the spirit which transcends the body and which you can catch a sense of through the body, even the dead body. And then we pan back to all the people who are happy about Scrooge's death. Now, Scrooge says, "Tell me somebody, can we move to a place where people are honoring a dead person?" All right. And that's our segue over to the Cratchits. So we move to the Cratchit house, and it's quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter. This is the brother, the older brother, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. That's all we get. It's one line from, well, it could be actually any of the synoptic gospels. For example, it could be Mark 9:36, one little fragment of a biblical verse, where it's Christ who takes a child and puts him in the middle of them, of his apostles. Well, on the one hand, that makes an intuitive sense in this novel. This is the house where Tiny Tim lived, and he, as we will shortly find, is dead. There's a kind of melodramatic pathos about referencing Christ putting him there amidst them. That all makes sense. But listen to the way that it continues. Where had Scrooge heard those words? We're hearing his very thoughts all of a sudden, right? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? So Scrooge actually has this desire to hear the rest of the passage. And that cues us, readers, also to think about the rest of the passage. Now, it may be that you hear this and don't actually know what the rest of the passage is, but in the Victorian period, there's a lot greater biblical literacy than what we have today. Most of them, I would guess, would be able to fill in something for the next part of this verse. I'll do that for you in case you can't. So the line that Peter read was, he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Stop. Scrooge wondering, what is the next thing? The next thing is this: whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me. That's the next thing that Christ says. And why is that important? I would suggest first, we're meant to supply this ourselves, just as I just did, in the silence of our own hearts or minds. And with it, to see that when a child is placed into the midst, it's actually God himself coming in amongst you. In the middle of this book, this verse means so much, because this whole novel has been a succession of children, of poor ones, of little things even, right, that are smaller than people, like calves or dead bodies. It's, apples and onions and all these things, but it's a succession of little ones coming to Scrooge. Also coming to us, by the way. And each of those, as we see in this pivotal moment, is actually a site of divine encounter. That's the secret, and the secret energy, the secret mysterious power and presence at the heart of this whole little novella. The divine entering time. This is, after all, the mystery of Christmas. This is what the incarnation is. And I think this is, in some ways, the linchpin of the whole book. The divine entering time in the incarnation. Christ coming to each soul in the child, in the poor one, the least of these, the smallest things. Something that Dickens said later, which I've thought a lot about, he said in a letter a few years after A Christmas Carol, that all of his Christmas books, because he wrote a few of these, this is the first of several Christmas books that he wrote. Dickens said, all of my Christmas books have some biblical verse at the heart of them that they're ruminating on, that they're trying to bring out and explicate in a certain way. This, for my money, is the verse that's at the heart of A Christmas Carol. He took a child, set him in the midst of them. Whosoever shall receive this one, or any one of my children, receiveth me. So the rest of the family is all sitting around. They're waiting for the father, for Bob Cratchit. He is slower to get home than usual. They're talking about this. I have known him walk, one of them says. I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Very fast indeed. So have I, cried Peter, often. So have I, exclaimed another. But he's walking slower now. Bob Cratchit, walks faster carrying a crippled boy on his shoulder. That's important, right? There's a kind of paradox here at the heart of the book, that the way of loving service to that child, that poor little boy, the way of loving service to him is actually easier than a way that is isolated from him. It's, of course, in a certain sense, quite literally more difficult, but that more difficult path, there's something easier about it, right? There's a light yoke there. He gets there, they go up and visit Tiny Tim's dead body upstairs, because this is one of the strange things that you don't always see. The kid is lying upstairs in a bed. He's being waked still. He is just very freshly dead. And we hear that the spirit of Tiny Tim is a childish essence from God. This kid who has so recently died is from God, literally created by God, but also maybe in the way that he's bringing the Cratchits together in love still after his death. So as we're on the last few pages, we're moving with Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Future to the graveyard. We know we're going to see Scrooge's grave uncovered. We know it well before he does. And Scrooge seems to have some hunch of this. "Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only?" Right? He's already trying to kind of figure out, is this really going to happen? Maybe he partially knows or knows at some level this is going to be about him. The ghost, of course, has never said anything. He's not going to say anything now. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead," said Scrooge. "But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me," says Scrooge. So he's hoping, right, this is a potential future, not a necessary future, right? If I change, if things go in a different direction, it could be different. And he sees his name, no surprise there. It all clicks together for him, and he exclaims, "Spirit," he cried, tight clutching at its robe. This is the scariest spirit, and he's holding on to it. "Hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope?" So he is hoping at hope, and holding on to the possibility of an opportunity to change. "Good Spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I may yet change these shadows you have shown me, and by an altered life." The kind hand trembled. "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." We'll talk about the three spirits, past, present, and future, striving within him in the next stave. That will come out nicely at the beginning of stave 5. But I want to underscore here that he's wrestling with this spirit again. He did this with the Ghost of Christmas Past for different reasons at the end of stave 2. Because he just couldn't take it anymore. Like, the past was overwhelming to him. And he's, just stop it. Here now, he's wrestling for a different reason. He's wrestling not because he's overwhelmed, but out of a loving, hopeful, faithful desire to bring about his own transformation, to be changed. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. So a nice kind of cinematic touch there at the end, but I just want to make sure we understand this. This is still Jacob wrestling with the angel. And Jacob comes away from that night at the end, having suffered a good deal and marked by his suffering, but blessed. He comes away blessed from that all-night struggle. And so Scrooge has wrestled with the angel all night. He's been marked by this, just like Jacob was. And yet we have to remember that Jacob was also blessed by this night-long struggle. Scrooge, prophetically, we're getting the sense, will also be blessed. With that, we're already looking forward in our minds to the beginning of stave 5. And that's where I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Hillsdale Online Courses podcast. If you want to continue learning about A Christmas Carol or other topics, please visit hillsdale.edu/course. There you will find over 40 free online courses, including the history of classical music, Paradise Lost, Theology 101, and many more. The courses include additional readings, study guides, fully produced videos, and you can chat with your fellow students on a dedicated forum. Upon completing a course, you will also get a certificate. All our courses are free because we believe that a virtuous citizen is the best defense for liberty. So pursue the education necessary for freedom and happiness at hillsdale.edu/course today. That's hillsdale.edu/course. Thanks for listening.